All right, everybody, welcome to another episode for our Sign Ask a Neurologist podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Stephan Mayer, who is the Director of Neurocritical Care and Emergency Neurology Services at WMC. And my name is Michelle, also part of the Sign e-board. We are very excited to welcome you here. Thank you so much, Dr. Mayer.
Thank you for having me.
And so just to kind of launch into a brief introduction for yourself, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your path to becoming a physician.
Sure. I am an academic neurointensivist. I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was 5, and I had figured out after wobbling a bit in college about what I wanted to do. It was either going to be a physician or a rock star. But then I started to play music, and I thought that some of the people in music are sketchy, and I thought, like, I want to be more like those doctors. They seem like thoughtful and caring, reliable people. Went to med school and knew it was the brain for me. I can't really help you more than that. I was like, oh, come on, the GI tract. I mean, it just wouldn't do it for me. And the brain is so full of mysteries, and it is the seat of consciousness. And as we like to say, it's the only organ left that you can't transplant. And I don't see that changing soon. So I figured I wanted to be a shrink going into med school. And but I had somewhat of an open mind. And then I did a second year rotation, and they put a white coat on you, and you spend Tuesday afternoon, drop you off at a doctor's office. So I said, okay, I guess I want to go to a psychiatrist's office. And they dropped me off there. And the psychiatrist that they paired me with was the most depressed human being I've ever met in my life. He was so depressed. And then, like, I'm standing there and there's this knock on the door, and they serve him with, like, papers for a lawsuit. And I was just like, oh, no. So I started to get more interested in neurology or neurosurgery. And I ended up picking neurology. And it was an interesting time because in those days, neurosurgery was like the pinnacle. And there was this article that said the queen of the medical specialties. And neurology had, a rap in those days, right? You've probably heard it, diagnose and adios. I'm proud personally to have been part of the movement that has completely smashed and destroyed and stamped out that line of thinking. But back in those days, it was a thing. And what happened was I went into the lab in my 4th year, and it was a very good lab. I went to Cornell University Medical College, what they called it at the time. And I designed an experiment. I gave myself 6 months of like minimal classes. I stroked out rats, and I would stroke them out by putting arterial lines in their tails, drilling little hole, exposing middle cerebral artery, and cauterizing it. Give the stroke, and I randomized this treatment. It's called GM ganglioside, right? And my days were spent spending hours peering through a microscope, doing these rat surgeries. And every rat surgery was the same, again and again and again. And I started to feel restless. And so I'll tell you a bit about intensivists, because you're all interested in neurology in general, right, Michelle?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So then we can talk about different types of neurology, why critical care for me. But long story short is I'm a little bit ADD spectrum. And I thought that, just like being a cabinet maker or neurosurgeon, it didn't have enough diversity for me personally. And on the other hand, I was thinking, if I go into neurology and do something really different, I might be able to have more of an impact, which is funny. I don't know how many people really are thinking about having an impact on the world. I hope you do. But I was thinking that way. I'm like, I want to make a difference. And so that's how I ended up applying for the match in neurology. I thought it'd be the best fit for me. I was a little unclear about what I would be doing in neurology, but I'll share another story. So I'm interviewing, and in those days, I went up to Harvard, Mass General, and they had the panel interview with all these guys against you on a table. It's you against like 5 established academic neurologists at Harvard. And they're like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I think what I want to do is take ICU patients with brain problems like strokes and stick them in a PET scanner and see what's happening with, brain blood flow, metabolism. And their faces were hysterical. They were like this guy's out of his mind, right? So I didn't match there. But anyway, but I was thinking a little bit outside the box from the start.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and your path. I think for many of us who may be interested in neurology, we sometimes sort of have that previous experience that might be pushing us in a direction. I think a common thread is one that you mentioned, which is that the brain is just the coolest organ, hands down. But I think for a lot of others who have no idea what the brain in neurology means, they may have a very narrow window into what that may look like. And so kind of hearing your path and how that looks is something that I think for many of us is really helpful. And so I think you sort of mentioned this before, kind of as you were thinking about psychiatry, neurosurgery, neurology. Um, During your first, couple years in medical school, your preclinical years, how would you say those played a role in helping you decide whether you wanted to pursue neurology, or did they help you push you in a certain direction between one subspecialty or another? Or was it really when you were in the hospital that helped with that decision making?
Yeah, the first 2 years had really no impact on choosing what specialty of medicine I wanted to do. It was all the third-year rotations. That was really, and actually, I'm not being totally fair. I really did like the psychiatry rotation, or to some extent, it's funny. I don't know if they loved me. I don't know why, but I was, I guess, kind of all in with everything I do. I kind of am that kind of person. Um, yeah, you kind of get exposed to these areas and ways of thinking. And sometimes I find you'll just have a rotation and spend like neurology in those days are 6 weeks. And you just get exposed to something and it just lights you up. You're just like, oh, wow, this is like the coolest, thing. And, I had that experience with neurology. Yeah, again, it's kind of like finding, where you seem to fit in the best and what inspires you the most. It's just, I think it's important to um, understand where your strengths are and, play to your strengths. And also, like, ultimately, the end of the day, the most important advice I can give all you guys is find out what you love to do. Where do you get that? Like you're relying so much on your gut instinct, your gut feeling. I felt social pressure to go into neurosurgery because I had the grades, right? And yet I sensed that for some reason, for me, I was going to be better off because of the kind of person I am, moving more into the medical area of neurology. And it's interesting too, because there was so much to do back in those days. And I was literally, TPA didn't exist. You couldn't treat strokes. There were no biologics to treat multiple sclerosis. We had Cinemet for Parkinson's from Oliver Sacks, or whoever those guys were. But, it was really like all future and potential. And for me, I found that actually I wasn't afraid of that. I actually saw that all as opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that's a good reminder for all of us as we're in this, part of our careers. and thinking about what it is we want to go into. And so next I was hoping to ask you a few questions about, what you specifically do in neurocritical care. What sort of patients are you working with? What conditions are you seeing most of the time?
Sure, sure. Well, if you're familiar with our hospital, Westchester Medical Center, we're the largest ICU in the hospital. We have 19 beds. And when I started to do it, even as a junior attending, I started to understand what a wonderful situation this is, because when you're the neurointensivist, you see only the sick people or the sickest people. Whenever anything's going on with any kind of drama or seriousness, you're in the middle of the action. And that goes for neurology or neurosurgery, right? So I'm appointed in both departments. I ended up being appointed in neurosurgery because neurocritical care is very important, to do neurosurgery and make sure you get good results for your patients if they undergo surgery and the whole thing, because they're sick to start with. So you're sort of in the center of the action. It's run like any other kind of ICU, where you start rounds in the morning, and you systematically go through each patient one by one, and you go through their events, like, okay, 24-hour events. This is how we round. Who are they? 24-hour events. What is the current status report? What are the current vitals? What are the current labs? We manage all the medical aspects as well as the neurologic aspects. And then we go to the bedside and we examine the patient. And bedside examination is very important in neurocritical care because it's ultimately the ground truth for how that patient's doing. It's your meter of you're winning or losing the game with the patient, looking for changes. And then you go out and you do review the management list by system. So what's the neurologic management plan? Respiratory, we're going to try to wean them off a ventilator. Cardiac, anything going on with that. Infectious disease, all these guys have fevers. Renal and fluid administration, endocrine, they're all hyperglycemic. GI, are we feeding them? And heme, right? Which is usually everyone's on DVT prophylaxis. So just to give you a flavor, but the variety of patients is varied. We're a huge stroke center. We have extremely high volume acute ischemic strokes, and we seem to specialize in the large vessel occlusion strokes, the MCA occlusions, because we offer the thrombectomy procedures here, which my interventional colleagues do that procedure. And they just try to get in as quickly as possible, open the vessel, and they're done. Then they come to the neuro ICU for that whole next phase of stabilization management. And then, we start thinking about, all those medical systems we're managing, because, people that have strokes, they're not the healthiest people, usually hypertensive and diabetic and all that. Aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage, hypertensive intracerebral hemorrhage, traumatic brain injury, status epilepticus, and those are what I call the big five. Excuse me, so you can tell I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to have a lozenge. And then there's a whole other grab bag of a wide variety of less common conditions. One of my favorites is dudes in a coma, and I don't know why. So we have to try to figure out, is this a toxidrome? There's various forms of encephalopathy. There's all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of action. You're managing, it's kind of like flying the airplane, when you're a kid and you see that cockpit with 37 dials on it, right? That's what this job is like. And things come at you quickly, like, oh no, bed 5's having a seizure. And you run in there, rapid AFib in bed 13, get in there, bring the crush cart in there. Look what your day's like. And there's so much action that then one day you have like a calm, quiet, chill day. Not a lot going on. No, everyone's seeing better. I'm around, somebody woke up from their coma. And those are nice days too. Not every day's crazy. And to some extent, I enjoy the feeling that I'm restoring things to order. And we're on top, we're out in front of things. The patients are doing well. Those are good days too.
Thank you so much. I think for me personally, that was extremely eye-opening. For I mainly have experience in aging and working in sort of the more realm of neurodegenerative diseases for me. So for the neuro ICU sounds like a completely different, world, that one that I haven't necessarily seen yet. And I think to hear about just the variety of cases that you see and you work with and how integrated all the other systems are, it's not just all about the brain, it's about, the lungs, kidneys, everything. For those who are interested in a more kind of overall approach can definitely be really interesting as well. For the team that you usually round with for cases, can you tell us a little bit about the collaboration that you see kind of on a day-to-day basis? Who are you working with most of the time?
That's a great question. Well, our rounding team is a neurology resident, and we have one every day, a neurosurgery resident, and we have a team of neurocritical care APPs, advanced practice providers, physician assistants, or nurse practitioners. And we have an APP on at night. There's an attending, and we have a fellow. Our fellows are drawn from either medical, pulmonary, critical care, and this year we launched our fellowship. So we have our own fellow, but he still can only be on whatever number of months a year, 4 or 5. So then the pulmonary critical care. So look at this team. You have neurologists, neurosurgery, medicine, pulmonary. It's as diverse a team as you can have. We are definitely unified. We're unifiers, and it's all about the team. So I have a number of things I said, and I will note that I've been doing this a long time. I ran the Columbia Neuro-ICU for 20 years. Then I took some other positions, first in Mount Sinai, went to the Midwest, tried that for a while at a big health system in Michigan called Henry Ford. Came back here in June of 20, middle of COVID, right? It was amazing. But we've been moving away from some of the older models they had to this idea of the team. And, what I say is, look, these people are trusting us with their lives. They're depending on us with their life. This is, life and death or life and limb, right? So it's important that, right, when we round on someone, we now have, plus we round with a pharmacist and a nutritionist. So how many people do we have? 5, 7 people, and the nurse, that makes 8. And we're all going to focus 8 smart human brains for half an hour on the needs of one person. And then we're going to go do it in bed 2, in bed 3, in bed 4. But it's not you taking care of the patient. The team is taking care of the patient. It's all about teamwork. And that's a very important principle in critical care. And I'll share a little anecdote if we have time about that whole teamwork thing. So we're super integrative in that way. Now, as an aside, a funny thing is the old model I mentioned was one attending, the neurosurgeon, or it could be a neurologist, master and commander, right? I'm in charge. Thou shalt not question me. I, rule. And that person then is getting minimal to no peer review. Minimal or no, well, did you think about this? Or, hey, I think we forgot this medicine. It fell off the med list. There's this important principle. Somebody when he asked me, why do you have this huge group of people making rounds? 8 people, medical students. I'm multiple looks, multiple touches. So if you get everybody all looking, right, it's easy with complicated patients for things to fall through the cracks. We're all fallible, we're human, right? So you minimize the chance of things falling through the cracks, and you optimize the benefit, right, by having everybody thinking about the patient, touching the patient and feeling responsible for every patient to some extent.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it is something that, we're learning in school, but it's just a great reminder that when we're in the hospital, when we're caring for these one patients, collaboration and teamwork is definitely going to be an everyday part, no matter where we go in the hospital.
Mhm.
Um, and so, thank you so much for sharing everything about, your career and what you do. And I think one of the burning questions on everybody's mind is how do we balance our careers with our personal lives, family, whether that means a family or, just having a life outside of work. Can you tell us a little bit about your work-life balance and kind of how you have maintained sort of that balance throughout your career?
Thank you. Well, in the beginning of my career, I was terrible at that. I was your classic overly ambitious workaholic, and it wasn't. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I paid a price personally. It was not the best thing for my older kids at the time, and happily, it all kind of worked out. And I've changed. I've grown as a person, and I've what my story is now. I'm great at work-life balance now. I'm much better at saying no. Because if you're successful in academic medicine career, it's not even, I mean, the hospital is just the start of it. Then it's doing the research, writing the books, traveling, giving lectures, consulting with companies. It just comes at you from everywhere. Being on a committee, right? And I used to be terrible at saying no. So that's the answer is no. Because I used to be terrible because I was more insecure and I felt like I had so much to prove the world. So I just said yes to everything and I just overwhelmed myself. And now, like, I appreciate my non-work life so much more. And there's this sort of, I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't have to prove everything to everyone all the time. Why can't I just go home and play catch with my kid? Or, call an old friend or pick up the guitar for a little while, or, you know, just do something that's going to be good for me, right? And good for my family. So, but the other thing I'm going to say is that there's so much conscious awareness of it now. It's become so normalized. That wasn't, when I was a third year medical student, I'll never forget, I said, I was reading the paper New York Times, and it was like, I can't bring the New York Times into the hospital. I'll look like I care about other things, and that would be terrible, right? That was literally my mindset at that point. So I think it's if you guys think at any point, I hate to say this, you're struggling with work-life balance, is so much better now than it used to be, and it's only going to continue to get better, just
Uh,
culturally.
mhm. Absolutely. And I think that's a good reminder as we just grow and mature in life. It's that we are also human, and sometimes learning how to say no can be a good life skill to have eventually.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so I kind of want to segue into just any other life lessons that you may have for us, sort of burning young medical students. Do you have any advice for those who may be trying to pursue a career, not only in neurology, but just in medicine in general?
Um, Medicine offers an extraordinarily diverse, different types of jobs and job descriptions and roles, unbelievably diverse. With that MD degree, I mean, you can be a cardiothoracic surgeon, or you can be a psychiatrist. You can sit in a dark room and read, you know, films. Um, you can be a researcher. You can become an activist, a politician. You can run a company. I mean, you can do anything. I think the real thing is, appreciating that. And Again, find out what drives you, where's your passion, what makes you, where do you feel the love, right? Where are you getting that joy from? And go get it. And now the other thing is, there are a lot of unhappy doctors out there, and there are certain things you're going to hear about, and they're to some extent true. Can feel like a grind. I'm a cog in the machine. These are the things that routinely come up that drive physician dissatisfaction. Yeah, cog, a lot of that, I'm just, the administration doesn't care about me. The insurance company's impossible. These families are crazy. You have the power to make your life and your career the one that you want. You have the power. And if you're in a situation like anything else in life, if it's not working for you, get out. I attended a critical care conference, and a very, very smart lady named Deb Cook. She did a lot of the original research or popularized the concept of EBM. And she was winning some special award. She was sitting right next to me. She gets up there and she said, and to conclude, I'm going to give you one last piece of advice. 3 things. Make a list. Number 1, write down all the things that you're not doing that you want to do. Number 2, make a list of all the things you're doing now you want to stop doing. Number 3, go back over 1 and 2. That was her advice.
I'm sitting here kind of thinking of that, and definitely something very, very profound, and something that I think in my daily life we don't really stop enough to really think about doing. So, thank you so much for that. I think this is advice I personally am going to be thinking about very often as we
I found it
continue
very
on.
useful. I found it personally very useful.
Absolutely. And for our last question, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We have our theme question, which is, what is your favorite part of the brain or CNS, and why?
Yeah, that is a hard one. So the best I can do is, for all you neurology people out there, I think it's the thalamus. Because the reason is that that you cannot be conscious. Conscious is like it's incredibly mind-blowing mystery. What is consciousness? And we all know, well, like all higher cortical functions are housed in the cerebral cortex, but you cannot be conscious without the thalamus. And the thalamus is this really, we don't really understand actually how it all works, but it's kind of like the central, the way I think of it, the brainstem is like Grand Central Station. It's the big highway with all the tracks going up and down, and your vegetative functions, autonomic function, breathing, swallowing, right? Cortex is, wherever, all the smart stuff is, but the thalamus is somehow like right in the middle there. And the leading theory is that there's this super high frequency gamma range frequency potentials that's like the thalamus is scanning the cortex and integrating everything. That consciousness is actually can be broken down into little tiny time packets, and somehow the thalamus is like running the show, and that's where consciousness comes from. So best I can do.
That was amazing. I think as I'm brushing up on my neuroanatomy, I love this question because it's a great reminder of why every single part of the brain is important, and it just comes together, and it's amazing the fact that it comes together and works the way it does. And so thank you again so much for your time. I think that's going to be wrapping up our episode, but we appreciate all the insight and advice that you've given us today. So thank you.
Yeah, best of luck. All I want to do is just plug, if you're not lucky enough to be assigned to 1 week in the neuro ICU, as a third year. We do have a fourth year elective. It's very popular. But if you're even kind of thinking about that side of neurology or neurosurgery for that matter, we love having our students in the ICU.
Excellent. I'm sure many of us will be wanting to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.